This video is a smorgasbord of various things that I have picked up over the years. Some of it is from personal experience, others from books, articles, and so forth over the time, learning from other people's mistakes. So first is becoming a manager. It's the ability to pull people together to work towards a company goal. So some people do it naturally. I found as a supervisor of a project that I could get things done. My managers respected that, and they started pushing me in that direction. So there's a certain skill set that one needs. A lot of people can never see past themselves. They think about everything in terms of me, but you have to be able to think in terms of what does the company need and what do my employees need. Major tech companies often use a strategy to force teaming, so they'll hire a new manager or put someone in a management position. And when you ask, who's my staff, they say anyone you can talk into helping you. And yeah, I sort of get it, because you are being forced to use charisma and management skills to go out and get a job done, even though you have no power over the people. And yeah, that's kind of good. But on the other hand, when you go around to people and you beg time and whatever, it can also create chaos, it create resentment. And also there are those who will be happy to block your success because of jealousy. As a manager, you help resolve issues for others and you keep them moving. You keep your people working, and your work is secondary. You put the company's best interests first. And again, a lot of people have trouble with that. You ensure that they have the most revenues, the most profits, and the lowest expenses possible. And there's no cruise control on this. It's something you've got to work at constantly. The best managers will attract, train, and retain the best employees. You'll hear this statement a lot. The highest HR costs come from bad managers. So whether it's poor decisions you make, or poor decisions someone else makes, or poor decisions from a manager you hired. You need to know your job, and you need to know how your job affects other managers around you. You're not operating in a vacuum, and that's part of being a team player. It's part of working for the company. You need to look outside your job. You need to learn backwards. You need to look backwards, learn the history, and look forward and keep moving forward. The number one rule that a lot of people forget is know your customer. Yes, absolutely. You need to know what your customer is using your product for, how much money they can afford to spend on you, and so forth. The business universe is dynamic, and you have to be dynamic also. There's no formula for success. The game and skills to succeed are always changing. I had the honor to listen to Dave Packard several times in person, and one of his most interesting talks was how he did not invent the transistor, but how he benefited from it. He said, I did not invent the transistor, but I certainly have benefited greatly by it. He said, I didn't invent the computer, but I benefited by it. He said, there are many things I did not invent, but he said, I have certainly benefited from it. He got a lot of chuckles from that, but it's absolutely true. He said that success was 93% work and 7% luck of being in the right place. A tip. Being popular is successful for maybe one person in 10,000, but being a nerd, being on top of things, being the guy with the answers is successful for about one person in 10. Being successful will make you unusual, guaranteed. But being unusual does not make a person successful. And you need to remember that when you're looking at yourself, and also when you're hiring people outside. Just because someone is unusual doesn't mean they're better. This is a rather interesting character. I believe he was a general from World War I, and he had his system for categorizing people. So the first one was people who are both smart and energetic, or ambitious, depending on how you translate it. They said they are potential threats or valuable assets depending on who they're loyal to. If they align with organizational ideology, they could be very important people. If they're disloyal or disagreeable, they are dangerous and they need to be gotten rid of. There was the smart but lazy. He said they can be useful, but they are passive tools. They can be employed in technical, bureaucratic, or intellectual roles. So scientists, engineers, or administrators, I kind of resent this, where their intelligence can be exploited for their benefit, and they pose little threat because they just don't have the drive to push through and to change the system. Then there's the energetic but not smart. He said these were easily manipulated and easily moved around by cunning managers. They're often zealous followers who carry out orders without thinking or questioning, especially the lower level ones. However, if they drive confusion, they need to be pushed out. And then there's the not smart and lazy. And these are the workers. They are unthinking, docile majority. They're swayed by talk and manipulated through emotional appeals such as company loyalty and through economic and social pressures. So you may find this a little bit blunt, but there's a lot of people out there who do think like this. So this is why I'm presenting this. A lot of people think that the CEO is the top boss, and in many ways they are. However, in a healthy company, it is recognized that the most important person is the customer. All money comes from the customer. If there's no customer rather, there is no money and there is no business. So the customer is always the top dog. Then come the shareholders, because they invest money, and if the shareholders are unhappy, they can actually vote out the board and the executives. Okay, then followed by the board, and then finally the CXX is the CEOs, the CIOs, and so forth. Okay, these are some red flags that I have personally seen or experienced in company management. And if these are companies you're considered working for, working with, you should consider these aspects. There are the incompetent managers, and these are often the Dunning-Krugers. And if you don't know what Dunning-Kruger is, it's worth going to look that up. Incompetence can spread like a cancer, and you have to remove it regardless of the cost. An A manager will hire A managers, but B managers will hire C managers, and it goes down the list like that. So poor managers hire even worse managers because they're intimidated by people who are at their level or better than they are. You'll hear a lot of covers for incompetence when you have people like that who are just not up to the task. They will say things like, "You don't understand, you don't get it, I'm playing the reverses, you don't know all I know," etc., etc. So again, warning signs. There's the cynical manager, and they have the attitude of, it doesn't matter what we do, the customers keep coming back, and even when we under-deliver, we keep succeeding. So yeah, I've seen this in small to medium companies mostly. Then there are rich kids pretending, and I have worked with a couple of those. There are people who received a lot of money. They play at business. They use the money they inherited to set up a business, to pretend like they're in business. The question to poke through this is, did the company's management come from merit, hard work, or did they just come from wealth and power? Are they from a family operation? They will talk the talk, but they often fail, and there's a lot of, "it's not my fault." There's the manager or management who does the opposite of what's smart or expected. And it is, some managers just need to show others that they are important and that they can do the opposite of what is smart, and they're forcing that on other people. So yeah, I can do what I want. I'm so important, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, at least for a while, until somebody gets tired of it. Some more red flags. I'm a genius. People who will confidently say I'm a genius or some statement to that effect. You cannot possibly understand my brilliance. You cannot possibly understand what I'm doing. I know of a company who, it was a Fortune 1000 company. They hired 2 top-tier MBAs. These MBAs were some of the most arrogant people you'd ever want to meet. Nobody could possibly understand their brilliance. They wrote a business model, a computer model for the industry, and the company made major decisions based on the outcome of that model. And it turns out that they had neither the technical nor the business experience to write that model. The results were basically a random number generator, and major decisions were based on the output of that, and it broke the company. The next thing is you'll hear stuff like X will never happen, such and such will never happen, it can't happen. And the more emphatic you hear from managers, something like that, the more likely it is to happen. And you say, what? It's not Murphy's Law, it's denial. A lot of people will get a sixth sense that something's going wrong, and they will start going into denial mode, and they'll be really tough about it. They'll get really emotional about it. But the more emphatic they are, the more you should count on it happening. Some yellow flags. So these are not quite as critical. So you'll have an executive bragging about how their company-wide process makes them special. Yeah, I mean, if you have an actual process that is a benefit to your company, you're going to keep that a secret. You don't go blabbing that around. I mean, if you're doing something that's giving you a head up on somebody else, yeah, you don't tell other people because they can copy that. So some examples of that are General Electric and Toyota have in the past have had these super special processes that made them better, and they talked about it. Yeah, to my experience, that's often more PR just to inflate the stock value of the company. I can't say about GE or Toyota what their intentions were, but I have seen it in other companies where that was the intention. The concept of I've reduced great management to a formula. Yes, we can do things, just kind of crank it out, turn the crank. An example of that might be Enron. I call these lame, look at me type companies, because that's really all they are. They're not really delivering what the customer wants. They're just kind of up there to have people look at them. They just want to be seen. They're, some of the words you can't use anymore, but they are attention getters. Yes, we can say that. So the best case is that a company cure-all like Six Sigma that, who was it, GE was pushing. I mean, if you put in a system and you say to yourself, okay, this system, as long as we follow these numbers and we get these numbers, the company's going to operate smoothly. The best case is that's going to create lazy managers. It's going to create low risk taking and kind of autopilot. People are going to put their feet up on the desk and say, as long as I get a spreadsheet with these numbers, everything's going to be good. And yeah, that happens way too often. Some orange flags, which are between red and yellow, are things like execs that are more interested in themselves or investors than they are in the customers. And that's a company that's starting to rot on the inside. Yeah, sure, executives have to watch out for their jobs because they are at risk from investors. But once they lose focus on the customer, then they're starting to lose money because really their power comes from delivering to customers. Yeah, they keep their jobs by keeping the investors happy, but if the customers are giving you truckloads of money, then I guarantee the investors are going to be happy. Companies that try to fight market direction or manage perception rather than delivering what customers want, things like Toyota spending money on the anti-EV marketing, Kodak suppressing their own digital cameras, GM killing their EV1 electric vehicle. Those kind of things are definitely orange flags. They could be a sign that a company is having serious issues, and whether you're going to go to work for them or deal with them, consider that. My opinion, since I'm not going to give stock advice, but my opinion is don't trust a company that says rising stock prices are better than dividends. Now, why would I say that? Why would I say down here that risk is much higher? Well, money in the hand is better than a promise of money tomorrow. So, yeah. That's a basic tenet of finance. It is much easier to pump a stock price than it is to do better in the markets. Yeah, producing a better quality or more products is harder than just pumping a stock price. Another thing to watch out for are companies that are transitioning from founders to the next gen management. They often become less entrepreneurial. They lose that risk taking. They become more numbers and formula oriented. More risk averse and more distant from customers, and they do less business by walking around. So this is kind of a common thing, but it's not something that actually bring up a lot in MBA school. However, with a little bit of experience out in the real world, you will start to see that. So risks increase, and these type of firms begin the long fade. More orange flags when bad management is not punished. So the excuse is that, and this is what I heard in MBA school, the manager has failed, they've learned their lesson, and we don't want to pay another manager to make that same mistake and pay for that lesson again. So just leave them in place. They've learned their lesson. That's over time, you start to accumulate managers who are not up to the task, and more excuses will be delivered. Managers will begin to be allowed to pass blame for their poor planning, training, and budgeting, prioritization, and so forth. And they'll just keep saying, I'm learning. Well, some people are just not up to management, and they don't have the personality. It's like being an Olympic swimmer or anything like that. Some people can do it, some people can't. And when people start having misfires, maybe it's better to put them in a position where they're going to be happy, where they're going to be competent, where they can do their best. Next, companies that are no longer about products and services, but rather about wealth creation for management and shareholders. This is a little similar to what I said earlier. But the reason I brought this up here is that I believe that good government regulation is good for business. I have seen, well, we've all seen that, like, for example, as airlines became more and more deregulated, the service to customers has become atrocious. I don't know about the safety record. It seems that they're less safe, but that could just be an impression. Yeah, so good government regulation can be good for business. It keeps them on the right path long term. They're not just doing things like pumping stock prices. They ensure that everyone in the industry is on the same level playing field, and it keeps businesses on track to produce goods and services we need and not go off into playing unproductive and dangerous financial games like happened in 2007. Okay, so let's talk about mistake management. Employees make mistakes, and yeah, they're going to make them when you're in a bad mood and whatever, but you have to stop, get hold of yourself and just say, was this mistake more serious than other mistakes that other employees have made? Or is this employee's mistakes out of proportion to their output? So if you have an employee who's burning up, twice as much work, and they're making 20% more mistakes, that's okay. That's a fair trade. I'll take that trade. So workers who produce more make more mistakes. It's just the way it is. But you have to look at, is the cost benefit still positive? If it's not, maybe you have to sit them down and say, okay, slow down, cowboy, and we need to, take some action to remediate these mistakes. So for example, when I was still an engineer, my boss came to me and he said, I noticed that you're using like 30% more computer time than anybody else. And I said, yeah, but if from your reports, I'm twice as productive as the other engineers. And he said, oh yeah, good point. And that was it, and he walked away. So this was a great boss because his ego didn't get wrapped up in his original statement. He took the information and he went on. He could have soured a good employee, but he did not. He just, no snide comments, just, yeah, you're right, and went back to his job. So one of those things that managers don't really like to talk about is feelings, emotions, stress. We're supposed to kind of tuck that down inside of us and deal with it on our own. Yeah, well, we do have feelings, and how our employees talk to us and how people react to us, those all affect us. So some of the things that you can help yourself and your employees with are with training and information. So those help to moderate feelings. So over here are things like employee feelings, customer feelings, political feelings, tech issue feelings, home issue feelings. Training and information can help hold these down, hold them in check. You don't want to try to suppress them. You need to deal with them. But that's where the training and information comes from. You learn how to deal with this stuff. Feelings can betray us. Yeah, there's Dunning-Kruger, I mentioned it before, and basically it is the less we know, the more we feel we know. Managers will oftentimes say, how hard can it be? So they'll look at, some employees' work, some employee will say, I need 2 or 3 weeks to do that, and they're going, no, how hard can that be? Well, okay, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, because you don't know what they're doing, and therefore it's very easy to minimize it. We often generate feelings towards something, our feelings plus our current mood, how we came to work feeling. Training and information give us an outcome. And more training and information gives us more reasonable outcomes. especially when we're under stress. And learning to deal when you're under stress is very important, because you're going to be under stress. You're going to have to visit a customer. You're going to have to talk to an employee, and you're going to be under stress, and you can't blow it. You can't let your own issues create a bigger problem than when it's already there. So the moral of the story is training cannot eliminate our emotional responses, but it can help us moderate them. So reasonable, reliable responses are easier to communicate to others. It is easier for others to accept. It's less prone to creating change and chaos, and is more profitable in the long run. So it pays to train, and it pays to get information. Let's talk about work at home. This is not going to be a popular topic for those who are employees, but from my experience as a manager and talking to HR managers, the fact is we are social creatures, and we respond to social hierarchies, and that includes taking orders from people. We don't take orders from telephones. We don't take orders from computer screens. We like to get face-to-face with people. We have a rapport with people. We have an emotional attachment to people. And that really makes a difference. A lot of people will say, no, I can, my boss calls me and tells me what to do. It's just not the same, especially long-term. So managers need to control as many variables as possible to ensure future outcomes. Yeah, again, that goes back to the stress part. Managers are under a lot of stress. They need to control all these outcomes in a world where outcomes are not guaranteed. You're juggling cats. And that includes controlling human resources. I know that sounds kind of blunt, but that's just the way it is. So from my experience, the long-term work at home attracts people with drug, alcohol, and psych issues. Yeah, sorry to have to say it, but that has happened a couple of times. So my personal work experience, I talked to an HR director, and his experience matched mine. Work at home is about 30% less efficient, and the cost savings of not having to keep an office space in the office for a person is not typically offset. Okay, so let's get over that and move on. Let's talk about time management, and this is again something that they don't really teach you in MBA school. They also don't teach you at work. The Donner Party, the famous Donner Party, where they got trapped in the snow and they were, cannibalism and all that. They stopped at the base of a mountain pass to rest for one night because they were tired. They said, we can't go on. They could have gone on, but they waited the day, they waited the night, and well, bad things happened. They got snowed in. In business, change is constant. You do not know what's going to happen. So getting things done now is better than waiting until later, because later something may have changed to mess up your plans. You don't know when the next snowstorm is coming, when competitors are going to hit you with a surprise, government is going to pass a new law, there's going to be a disaster, there's going to be war, there's going to be COVID, something like that's going to happen. The next point, there is no such thing as nothing to do. That's true for you, and it's true for your employees. Waiting is not working. I was in a meeting one time, and I asked one of my engineers, so what's going on? He said, well, I'm waiting for Joe to deliver something. And I said, what are you doing in the meantime? And he said, well, I'm waiting. And I said, yeah, waiting is not a task. So what are you doing? Are you telling me you're doing nothing? And he's like, well, I said, could you move on to the next segment that's not dependent on Joe? And he said, well, yeah, I could start that. And I said, yeah, why don't we do that? When you're fried, when you're tired, when you're stressed, do some light duty. It's not good to go home in the middle of the day. You may have to, but it's not a good habit to get into. So just find some light duty, whether it's cleaning up around the office, make calls, whatever. But you need to set an example for your subordinates. And time is like compound interest. So time lost at the beginning of a project is extremely expensive, because that time rolls forward that was lost until it can become a project killer. Lost time equals lost money, equals lost ideas, equals lost team building, equals lost execution. I would love to go on and on about this, but okay, this is the short summary. I'll make some breakout videos on some of these topics and go into more detail. Lawyer management. So dealing with lawyers. Don't get involved with lawyers unless you really, really have to. Bad lawyers will drag out a solution. I've seen this happen too many times. It's happened to me too many times. Yeah, sometimes you can't avoid using lawyers, but you know what? They make for bad suppliers, they make for bad workers, they make for bad mechanics, doctors. They don't fix things. They're kind of a last resort, and they are a huge time and money sink, and the whole situation will just stress you out. There's an old Chinese saying that it's better to eat dog than to go to court, and absolutely it's true. A bad lawyer will not understand the business or the goal of the situation. For example, I got in a circumstance where the company lawyer, well, actually it was an outside lawyer, so we had to pay them $1,000 every time they wrote a letter to this other company. And the other company would just write back a nonsense letter. And I caught on right away what was going on. After the second letter from the outside, I said, yeah, these people are just jerking us around. And I called the lawyer and I said, what are you going to do about this? And he said, I'm going to write him another letter. I said, no, stop, that's it, done. So I said, you step out of this and I'm going to handle it. And so I got on the phone, I called him, and we just settled it. So yeah, but I burned, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. Good lawyers, when asked, what does this contract mean? The answer will be something like, what do you need it to mean? And that's not a literal thing. What the lawyer is asking you is what you need to get out of this negotiation, because a contract is actually sort of a negotiation. What do you need to get out of that? And yeah, so a good lawyer is going to listen to you. They're going to listen to the situation. They're not going to just like pop off a letter and say, okay, this is going to solve it. No, they're going to get the background of the situation and they're going to help you solve it. Yeah, this is a kind of a heads up. If you're going to go to work for a company, you may want to check the type of management it has at the very top. There is kind of a curse of the psychopathic leadership that has been popular since the early 80s. You can read over here what psychopathy is, or psychopathy, as some people say. It's a personality disorder marked by impaired empathy, so the inability to understand how others feel, and remorse coupled with bold, uninhibited, and self-centered traits. Traits are often masked by superficial charm and immunity to stress, which gives an outward appearance of normalcy. I've worked for two of these types, and they can pull you right in. You think you know them very well, they're very charming, but things go bad in a very serious way. So some of the symptoms is the company will have an aristocracy rather than merit in management. Blame will flow downhill. The bosses are never wrong. They're never held responsible. They'll say things like, the employees failed to execute to our vision. Yeah, whatever that means. They'll have ghostwriters write a flattering book about them. And these books are worth reading for their warning value to you. So you can kind of see how they operate, how they think. They create shareholder value with PR, and oftentimes stock prices will be inflated far above the asset and earnings value. I'm not talking about any particular companies, because I've worked with smaller companies that do these same things as bigger companies. So workers are treated as replaceable objects. I had one CEO tell me, they're taking my money. The employees are taking my money. And I knew this guy personally, and I said, no, they're not taking your money. They are selling you their time, and you're giving them money for that. He couldn't get that. That was beyond him. They're taking my money. These people can be incredibly good at getting their way, and that means at the expense of all others in the company. So again, before you go to work for one, before you go to work for a company that's got that kind of management, think about it twice. So here is a reading list of some things that are worth checking out for history on why the U.S. business is where it is today. The first one is Milton Friedman. And I will just say that business propaganda pays. He made a career out of pushing a line about free markets. Read the book and look at my my video on free markets and see how that works. And then another book, Jack Straight from the Gut. Well, as I read this book, I thought, wow, this is a guy who's focused on himself, his personal wealth, his ego, his assets. When he talked about other people, he talked about them like they were plastic dolls. He just couldn't get them. And there's a nickname he developed over time that he really hated. He was called Neutron Jack, because at the time, America was working on a neutron bomb, which was supposed to, it would destroy the people but leave the building standing. And that's the reputation he got, was for destroying people but leaving his assets intact. Some good examples for things to read in business are Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Very old book written in the 1920s, but still very, very applicable today. It's really a book on psychology. It was started out for salespeople on how to deal with your customers, but it evolved into something more. It's definitely worth reading every 6 months during your whole career. Another good book is Lee Iacocca's original Ford Mustang Chrysler turnaround in the book Iacocca, an autobiography. And then another book which is very hard to find, but it's written by this gentleman. It's How to Succeed in Company Politics, the Strategy of Executive Success. And this is good from a pre-1970 type history. This guy used to be a top consultant for executives around the world. And yeah, it talks about how business used to be, and then you can compare it to how business is today. So, okay, that's it for this rather long video. On to the next topic.